Okay, so now we have again two very quick topics, and then we'll program a little bit. Okay, that's actually what you're supposed to do in the lab tomorrow and on Thursday. Okay, so first topic is modules. Okay. Actually, I didn't really know where to put this, but I think here it fits more or less well, okay? Because it gives us what is needed to import a library, and then we will talk about a very, very specific library just to handle dates, something that for sure you will have to do at the exam, okay? Because I must tell you, well, might have been one exam where you didn't have to use dates, okay? But I mean, in general, it's so common to use dates, okay? So we want to introduce how to use libraries. And to do this, we need to talk about modules. And then on Thursday, so next lecture, we will talk about the security implication of using modules, libraries, and so on. And then go on with the rest of the language, in particular starting a more difficult topic of asynchronous programming, asynchronous callbacks, etc. Okay? But for the moment, let's start with the simple stuff. Okay? Modules. Modules basically are a mechanism for splitting JavaScript programs into different separate files. You remember the first lecture? Last Monday I told you. Well, JavaScript is made by a single file, okay? Single file, one program, one file, okay? You need to share information between different files. Well, it's, thank you. Thank you very much. You need to use global variables, but of course, you know that global variables are a bad programming habit, okay? So, over time, things evolved, and nowadays we have modules which are very quite stable mechanism to split the program into separate files, and of course make the files communicate. Okay, because splitting is easy, making them communicate is the more difficult thing, and make them communicate in a clean way. Okay, without sharing this global state. Just sharing what is really needed, okay? So modules are a way to hide private implementation details, okay? So not to fill up the global space with variables, names, and so on. And so at a certain point, maybe by mistake, you use the wrong names that has already been used by somebody else, by a library, etc., etc. Okay? There are three different ways to achieve this goal. One is, let's say, the do-it-yourself, but I wouldn't call them modules. Okay? So just here for completeness. You remember the immediately invoke the function expressions. In JavaScript, you open a function scope, so you define a function, you put whatever you want inside, you add the function whatever, you close it, the function, you call it, everything goes into a closure. So it's inaccessible from outside unless you return some handles, some references, and so on. Okay, there's a way to isolate content, but that's also the way in which one of the two systems did the things under the hood. Okay, but I mean, just sort of, let's say, for completeness. Okay, the way in which things are done nowadays is number 2 is the so-called ES6 modules. Yes. Oh, okay. So let me a new, right? We can pause the recording. Let's pause again. Okay. Okay. So, so we were saying today, nowadays, actually, not just today, nowadays, ES6 modules, okay, are the way that we will use during the course, but also you use in practice to have more than one file collaborate together to create your JavaScript program. Okay? This is standardized. There are keywords for this, and we're going to see them in a minute, export, import, and so on. So ECMA standard means it's JavaScript, standard JavaScript. Okay? And also, the good news is that it's supported by recent browsers and also supported by Node. Okay? Until last year, I would say, we didn't really support it so much in the slides. I mean, later on, yes, because the browser started supporting modules earlier. But then Node, okay, Node actually used a different system. Okay, so, but nowadays Node can also support ES6 modules very well. So we think that from now on we can just stick to modules and forget about the rest. Anyway, let's describe what an ES6 module is. Okay, module is a JavaScript file that exports some values. Okay, remember that can be anything. Of course, it can be fixed values, integer strings, no, not in numbers, strings, Boolean, etc. But it can be objects, arrays, and functions, especially functions. Okay, using the export keyword. Okay, a module is a piece of code that is executed once it is loaded. Typically, it doesn't do that much computation. It defines functions. Okay. Because you want to import functions, library functions, and so on. And then there is another piece of JavaScript code that imports what has been exported by the other files. Okay? And there is a keyword for this as well, import. Import and export must be at the top level. Okay? You cannot import inside a function. Okay? And there are two main kinds of exports. Named exports, there can be more than one, and default export, of course, is at the default there is just one for each module. Okay? So how do we use them? Well, we need to have two files at least, right, to make them work. Okay? Either we define both files, or we have one file and the other file has been defined by a library, by a package, and so on. Okay? And so, first, how do we export something? Well, just, write export, the keyword, default, and then a value. That can be anything. Like in this case, it's a function. Okay? A function immediately defined here, string. Take a string as a parameter, returns the uppercase of the string, uppercase version of the string. Or maybe it can be an object, can be a string, can be a variable that references anything, a function, an object, an array, and so on. Okay? Often you export objects. Why? Because it's very flexible. You export one thing, an object, you open the curly bracket, and you have a lot of what's the name? A lot of properties that you can export and you can access through that object. Okay? You just know the name. Can be values, can be arrays, can be functions. Okay? Okay, so the syntax is very easy. Export default a certain value. You can also give names to export, and in this case, you're not limited to export one single value, but you can export more than one value. Okay? But you need to give names. So export with the curly bracket, one value, another value, and so on. Okay? The export also the name, unless you use this syntax, you want to change the name. It takes the default name of the variable that you used in the list of the export. Okay? So let's say you are creating a module that handles, that has an object that can do sums, subtractions, and so on. You export a function sum, subtract, and so on, and you put them into a list here. Okay? That's perfectly possible. Okay? And then on the other side, you need to import. the values. Okay, so we are in a second file, in another file, and we need to say import something, package, whatever, from and the module name that is basically the name of the file. Okay, then if it's a package, you have the name of the package, but I mean in general, if it's a library, the name of the library, but in general, I mean for these very simple examples, in this case we will have the name of the file. Okay, note that imports are read-only. I mean it doesn't make sense to change the value that you import. Okay, because it's just a reference to something which is outside and you cannot really modify it. It has no sense, it doesn't make sense. And hoisted means that if you import at a certain point in your file, it's like you wrote it in the top of the file. Okay, but I must tell you, it doesn't make that much sense to import later on, at least in your files. If you are in a library and you want to decide if you want to import more or one thing or not later on and so on, okay, it's fine. But I mean, typically since they are hosted, it makes sense to import in the beginning of the file. Okay, so one file and another file, two files, module 1, module 2. Okay, so one export something. In this case, it's a default export, and on the right, import, you give a name to the default export from, and you need to put the path to the file that contains what you want to import. Okay? Another example, you can use a relative path, absolute path. Of course, relative path is, let's say, required for the exam, okay? Because we will like to move the code around, okay? I don't really know which folder I will use for your project, okay? But I mean, it's really normal to use relative names to the root of the project. I mean, to the root of the file, actually, not the project. And then once you import the exports from the other file, well, you use them as normal variables, okay? You imported a function, you call it. You imported the value, you use it. You imported an array, you iterate over the array, and so on. Of course, you need to know what you imported. Of course, like when you have a global variable, okay? You need to know if it was supposed to be a number, or string, a function, an object, and so on. If it's an object, what's inside the object, and so on. Okay? No, nothing really special. Okay? From a named export, the syntax is just slightly different. Okay? So you see, you need to use the curly brackets. Okay? Just to say that you want to import some of these, okay? Some of these exports here. In this case, we import everything, but typically in the libraries export a lot of things, and you want to import only what you want, okay, what you require, okay? Like, I don't know, there's a dayjs library, there's plenty of methods to do many things. Maybe you want to import only the ones that you actually use in your code, to keep the code lighter. That's the reason, okay? We're used to waste resources, but that's another discussion. Okay, you can even change the name with the same syntax as, etc. Okay, in case you need to change the name. So there is a way of avoiding name conflicts, just in case. Okay. But I must tell you, the most common way is export an object. So you choose a name for the object that basically represents the other module, and inside the object you put whatever you want. And so you access everything you imported with the dot syntax, okay? The module dot my function 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. Okay? Good. You can import everything. You can import only with a star. You can import only something, okay? Just a subset. You can even import also the default along with named export and so on. Okay, but I would say very special cases, but you will see, I mean, it's very intuitive to use. Okay, from one side, one has to export, and the other side you have to import. Just decide to use a way like the named export, you give a name, and on the other side import with the same name. That's all. Use the curly brackets, and that's all. This works in a browser as well. We will come back to this when it's needed. Okay. At a certain point, I think third week, end of third week, we start talking about browsers. And modules works in the browser as well. Okay? What is important for us today, and for this course, for Node.js? Well, from Node.js 14, okay, in 2020, so a few years ago, but I mean, I would say it's stable and working very well, I would say only since a few years, like 2-3 years maybe. Node supports the ES6 modules, okay? And so from now on, and they are enabled by default, okay? So we don't have to do anything, okay? That's the good part. And to use ES6 modules, we just need to be careful and write in files whose extension is .mjs instead of JS. Otherwise, we need to do configuration stuff like changing entries in package.json and so on. I mean, let's forget about the difficult thing. We try to keep the things as simple as possible. .mjs, and that's all. And also, the nice news is also that MJS files are automatically executed in strict mode. You can forget the string. Use strict. Okay? Everything is automatically in strict mode because it's so convenient nowadays, and modules can only be executed in strict mode because basically nobody thought it was useful to use the older mode anymore. Okay? Just beware of one thing, and that's the reason why until today we hesitated a little bit to use them in Node, is that not all Node.js modules are provided as ES6 modules. Okay, there is another format. We will just give an hint at that. So you go into the repository of all the packages, libraries, and so on. I would say 99% have the ES6 version, module version. And but there is a very small percentage, maybe not so much updated, so I'm not sure if you should use it or not. Maybe it's not so wise to use it. And for those, you need to change the convention and use the other way of the other type of module that we're going to see in a minute. Okay? But for this course, for now on, I checked everything until the end of the course, since we have a little bit of history and we know where we're going to go. Everything works with Node.js, with ES6, so we are going to use ES6 also for Node, and that's all. Okay? So we will always use .mjs and from now on. Okay? Also in the example in a minute. CommonJS. CommonJS is the other format. Actually, it was born before the ES6, okay? It was born with the Node, and it was the standard format for Node, okay? And use this trick of the function, etc., done automatically by Node, okay? But this is just a technicality. I mean, just be aware of the fact that you see, if you see CommonJS Node module format, that's the format coming from the older Node.js version, which are still supported, by the way, by Node, okay? But we are not going to use it just for simplicity, because we have this import, export, and that's all. 2 keywords, and we solve the problem, okay? So you find the syntax, which is not that difficult, but instead of import from, you have to define a variable, call this special function require, and give the path, etc., etc., okay? And what you want to export, you need to put it into this export a special variable, etc. Okay? I mean, just for reference, for us, that's all. MJS, import and export keywords. Okay? Good. So now that we have this concept, let's discuss a little bit of a package. And on Thursday, we will have a more comprehensive discussion about packages, also thinking in terms of security, since you are from the cybersecurity course of study, okay? Because bringing in code from outside is always a security risk, right? Always. And so we need to be careful about what we do. Okay, before that, I want to show you how this import and export works, not on a toy example like ours before. Okay, we define a function, we import a function, okay. Very easy, but not so useful. Basically, every library, every package that we can use that have been developed by others require us to import something, okay? And let's see a very simple example that is also very useful because, as I was saying in the beginning, probably at the exam you will have to use dates for one reason or another, okay? Also because in web application, very, very often you do some operation and you need to save the date or the time and date and the timestamp and so on of what you did, okay? So it's very, very common to use these functionalities. Okay, so dayjs is a package. We can call it a library if we like it more, okay? Here I will give you some instruction on how to use it, and then we will use it in the example. And then again, next time we will discuss in more depth how this mechanism works under the hood and what are the implications and so on. So how do you install a package or a library in JavaScript? Well, typically you install it from the command line, and to do so and do it in a clean way, okay, first of all you initialize the package manager. We don't do it by hand. We don't go on a website and click and download and so on, but we do it with a package manager, which is also a repository already configured that contains all the packages that are available and so on. Of course, this is something to be careful about, as we will see next lecture. Okay, so npm init, it creates the structure to import packages, and then we say to install, so to import this dayjs. This downloads the code and make it available to our project, okay, our application if you like, okay. So a special configuration file is automatically created, this package.json, and you will see that in the list of dependencies there is this dayjs with a certain version, etc. Okay. In short, after these two operations, we will see it in the example, you have the original file, let's say index.mjs is where we started and where we write our code, okay? And then there is a folder, node modules folder, this name, okay? That contains all the code of all the packages that we are going to install, including this dayjs, and two other files, package.json, package.json, that contains, one contains this text, the content, okay, name of the project, etc., and especially the list of dependencies. And the package.log contains the list of packages actually installed, and more details next time, okay? The version actually installed, the hash, etc., etc., etc. The important thing is for us is that we have a file where we can develop and we can import, okay, the content that we just installed, okay? Insert the import statement here inside the index.mjs to use the package. Okay, so in our JavaScript file, we do import a name that we choose, which is very, very often the same name of the package, just not to be confused, okay? I can call it ABC, but then I need to remember that ABC is dayjs, okay? So typically I use the same name, but I mean, if there is a clash, a problem, you can choose the name you want. From dayjs, without the extension, because it's in the node modules package, so it's treated a little bit different from our files, okay? And then you use it. How you use it depends on the ones that wrote the package, the library, and so on, okay? If dayjs is a function can be called, you call it. If it's an object, you do dot something and you use the content and so on, okay? So you need to look into the documentation of the package, the libraries, and so on, okay? Of course, we will give you some advice how to start, at least with the most common stuff. React is basically a package, a library like this, okay? So first you import it, and then you would use the names that you imported in your code, okay? So here we start with something simple. Dayjs is just a library to handle dates. Okay. Just a couple of words of dayjs, and then we program a little bit. Okay, so we write some code and we solve the exercise 3. dayjs is a very commonly used library in JavaScript for handling dates. Once there was this library moment.js that was very, very widespread, but at a certain point, for some reasons, I think discussion between the developers, always happen that somebody does not agree with others, and the project split, project dies, somebody forks the project, create a new project, and so on. These things might happen, unfortunately. So moment.js was sort of standard, and nowadays I would say that the inheritance from that very standard library has been taken by this dayjs, which has a very different approach from the moment.js. Moment.js used to include everything. And here, the dayjs instead includes very, very few things, just 2 kilobytes of code, okay, very small for today's standard. But then you can import additional functionalities inside the dayjs, from the dayjs itself, only what you need, okay? It works also in the browser, that's why, of course, we see it, and everything we are going to see, well, except the one on the server side, so the database, works in the browser as well, okay? So we only learn one thing for both sides. All objects are immutable. It's sort of like strings. We cannot modify dates. We can create new dates if needed, of course. It has all the support that you would expect from a day and time library, okay? And again, there is a plugin system for extending functionality, so you can handle more complex situations, but only if you need it. So let's say it's a very modular approach, and it tries not to use too much code if it's not needed, okay? So if you import a module which is 100 megabytes, and you say import, I mean, the JavaScript interpreter has no other choice than to parse and execute 1 megabyte of code, okay? And this might slow down your computer, your mobile phone, whatever browser you're using, and so on. So having smaller code, let's say it's better in general. I mean, as having smaller programs, etc., except for the guys who sell the hardware, right? Okay? But, I mean, in general, let's try not to import or write too much code if it's not needed, okay? Just as a general principle, I mean, not just this course, okay? And here you find some example how to use the dayjs library. We're not going into many details. I mean, just you see that it supports many formats. Actually, just be careful. There is, there is this date object. This is from the JavaScript standard library, this date. You see here, new date, 2019, etc. We don't want to use it. I mean, it's not like it's wrong, it's broken and so on. But it has a number of quirks, I mean, difficulties, and sometimes unexpected behaviors, again, that we don't want to deal with. That's why we want to use a library to handle dates, which is very simple, very linear, very easy to use, and so that we avoid introducing unnecessary bugs, okay? So, it's not wrong in general. Again, think about the exam, since you like listening about the exam. Of course, if I say date inside the code, I just start to be suspicious again. I know I'm very suspicious. But, you know, date, it works. I mean, if you just want to write a line of code and test it, okay, that's fine. But, I mean, to work with more complex situations like handling, for instance, formats or handling time zones and stuff like that, use a library. Okay, libraries have been tested very, very well, and there is actually not a real reason why you should use the built-in object date of JavaScript, which has, again, some problems. We are not going to discuss them here. Okay, small problems. I mean, they take. I mean, if you just ask which day it is, it works. Okay, but maybe leap seconds and stuff like that, time zones, etc. They might be some small problems. Okay. Oh, you see that here we call it without a new. Okay. I mean, the designer of the library decided this way. Okay. They provide examples, and you see what the examples do. Okay. I mean, they decide not to provide you a constructor function. That's a choice. Okay. Other libraries maybe have different approaches. Okay, here you see a lot of documentation, but I would say this is just a reference. Okay. When you need it, you search for it, and at least you have a starting point. Maybe we can have a look at this last thing. I told you dayjs is very small, sometimes you need some additional functionality. And this additional functionality is brought in by plugins. Plugins are basically files that are installed for this package, are installed together with the package, but they are not imported by default. So you need to import them manually. How? As we just saw before with the modules. Import from. Okay? So import is lib here from the JS plugin is lib_here.js. Okay? And then you need to tell dayjs that you imported the plugin. Okay? That's the way in which they design the dayjs library. Okay? So, in short, you have no method islib here until you import this this file. Okay? Why? That's the way they chose to develop the library. Okay? They didn't agree in the beginning, probably, with the guys of Moment.js, as I told you before. I mean, that's the result. But the important thing for us today is just to see. You see, you can import everything. Okay? Just be careful of the syntax. Okay? And I mean, it's just an import as any other import you might do in your project. Okay? Yes. So you just check the internet for the rest, I would say. Okay? Let's say on Thursday we will do more, but npm dayjs. Okay? I wrote npm dayjs. npm is one of the biggest repositories of Node packages and JavaScript packages. And you see all the versions, some documentations, and so on. Okay? Getting started, installation, examples, internationalization. I hope there is a link for documentation somewhere. I cannot see it now, but I mean, home page of the project, probably it's on the home page. Hopefully. I didn't check the docs. Okay? So, query is before, is after, is examples of how to do anything you are supposed to do with dates. Okay? Often with dates, you need to format the dates or make operations like differences. How many days between one date and the other date, and so on. There is documentation. You search for it. Typically, you see examples, and you just adapt these examples. Okay? Or you ask the AI, but again, be careful with this AI. Okay. Okay, so today, remaining part of this lecture, we still have quite a lot of time, so we have time to finish the exercises that we saw last time. Okay? So, you remember that we developed exercise 1 and 2. It was about arrays and strings. Third one is about objects. And we can play a little bit with the this and with the new and so on, okay? So we practice a little bit. And then if you want to forget about this approach and you just want to create objects, opening the curly bracket and creating it yourself, that's perfectly fine. We don't really care for this at the exam, okay? Because it's a matter of style. It's not like we have a programming language and that is object-oriented, and so if you try to use it in a non-object-oriented way, I mean, you are doing something that is probably not so good in terms of readability and so on. Okay? But just to show you a complete example about how to use an object in a sort of object-oriented programming way in JavaScript, we try to develop this exercise, solve actually this exercise. So the goal is managing a simple data structure that is made as an array of objects, like you remember before the cars, the SUV, SUV, sedan, and normal cars, whatever the name is. Okay, it's an array of structures. Okay, Q&A means question and answer. So we would like to develop a JavaScript object. Using JavaScript objects, manage objects that contain information about a question and their answers. Okay, that's the example that we are going to carry on in the lectures here while the course proceeds. So we will have a website where we have a question or some questions. So for each question there are a set of answers. Okay, and over time we will have add, edit, delete, and so on. This kind of buttons to develop a very basic web application. But first of all, we need a data structure. We need a place where we store the information, right? So each answer should contain response text, respondent name, okay? The respondent name, score, it's an integer number, positive or negative, a date, okay? So we practice with the dates. Define a constructor function answer. So constructor function, here the text requires to define a constructor function. So we need to use the this and then new to create the new object, okay? To create one or more answer, a question instead of made of question and name, date, a list of answers, okay? Define also constructor function question to represent a question, implement the following methods to manipulate the answer, add, find, etc., okay? Create an instance of question with at least 4 answers and test in it and test the previous methods. So define the 2 objects in terms of constructor functions, so questions and answers, and then write some code to fill up the answers in a question and test the code. Okay, that's the basic message. Okay. So you might have noticed that I have already put some files here. Some is for next lecture, but in the QA folder, there is this exe3, okay? Very basic stuff, so I don't write too much. Otherwise, the only option is I copy paste or I wait for the AI, okay? So this file is already available to you, okay? exe3, exercise3. Not MJS, okay? MJS, it's a module, okay? So it's already executed in strict mode. Okay, let's go inside here in the Visual Studio Code, okay? That's the same file you can see in the web. So a few comments, each answer should contain, a question should contain. That's the stuff from the text, from the exercise. Okay? So let's try to fill up some code here in the functions, and then we'll try to implement the methods. Okay? I already have some mock data. Okay, so answer text, that's an array of arrays. Okay? So you see 1, 2, 3, 4. There are 3 arrays with 4 elements each. That are supposed to be the answers. Okay, actually including text, only text, I would say. Okay, and well, the rest is just comments. Okay, just to write things more quickly. Actually, this file can be executed. How do you execute it? Terminal, new terminal. You can run it. Node, no, before that you need to move in the correct folder. week02 Q&A. Okay, there is the file. Node x3. Okay, it does nothing because the functions are empty. Okay, there are two functions defined but not used. Okay, and then there is this array. I did console log the array, and that's all. Okay, but note I could execute this file. This file mjs, fine. mjs tells Node to execute it in strict mode. Okay, so we don't care anymore to use the usestrict. Okay. Okay, good. So now let's focus on what we should do. So first, define the constructor function answer. Well, since it contains 4 elements, I would say we pass 4 parameters to the constructor. Okay? Do you agree? You have a different idea? Just tell me. So the first text is the text of the response, respondent, the score, which is supposed to be a number, and the date. In which format? Well, I don't really know at the moment. Okay, I should look at what the library does if I want to use the library. For the moment, you saw before here, it's just a string. Okay. But, I mean, let's try to write something. So, I told you before, you remember the this. If we are going to call this function with new answer at a certain point, yeah, this gives too much advice. At a certain point, we have the this defined inside the function, right? And the this points to the newly created object. So it makes perfectly fine to do what we do typically in any constructor function. We do initialization, right? This text equal to text. Okay? The text on the suggested. Well, okay, we did the rest as well. Okay. Text on the left is a property that we add to the newly created object. Okay? That is referenced by this. Okay? The text on the right, that is the variable that is passed as first parameter of the constructor. Okay? Just to clarify, text2, there should be text2, right? Okay? One is the parameter, and the other is a new property that we define on a newly created object. Okay? So we can use, of course, any name, but in the interest of clarity and simplicity, of course, we tend to use the same names. Okay? So text and text. Okay. So this text, this responded, this score, this date, that's fine. Okay? Do we need to return something? Return this? Not needed, right? We said before, if you do nothing, if you call it with the new, the function, the constructor function returns the newly created object. Okay? It's actually what happens in other programming languages as well. Okay? Of course, you can return something, as we said before with one of your colleagues, but I mean, we don't really care. I mean, we are using a constructor function. We want to get back the newly created object. Okay? Okay, save. And now nothing happens. Well, you can run the code. Okay? Just to make sure you don't have syntax errors. Of course, with the AI suggesting, often it works. Okay? More often it works than when it doesn't work. But then, well, let's try to create an answer, right? So, let's create the answer. Const a1 equal to new answer. Okay, I like it. The text that has been defined before. I'll make it a bit smaller. Okay? So, answer text. Element 0, and inside the element 0, there's another array, so element 0. Then 1, then 2, and then 3. Okay? That's fine. So, save. Run it. Okay? Still nothing because we didn't print anything, right? Let's see what happens in case we do console log. I'm not really sure. Console log A1. Okay? Well, console log is so nice that it prints the content of the answer object in a very nice way. It even writes the sort of type of the object, even though we say there's no type in JavaScript for the object, right? Okay? We define the constructor function answer. You see now the color. It's not, it's used now. Okay? It's not unused like question. And we just printed it. Okay? Fine. Okay. I mean, there's really nothing more than this that we should do for the answer. It's just a sort of container. It's like a struct for the C language. It's like an object for Java or for Python. Okay? It's a container of data. Okay? We can access this element with this data inside the object with the property names. Text, response, score date. Okay? Question. Well, we do the same actually. Let's see if it just if the AI suggests correctly. Yes, even too much. Okay? I mean, it's guessing from last year's solutions. I mean, not so difficult. You just go last year's solutions and you have the solution. But questions. Text, question, or date. Here we have 3 parameters instead of 4. That's fine. Okay? But as we said in the text here, there is a list of answers. Okay? So, list of answers. These answers. Okay? What? Empty array. That's fine. Okay? For the moment, it's empty. Okay? It's an empty array. How do we define an empty array? Open and close brackets. Okay? Good. And then later, we will add the answers here to the question object. Okay? So let's define a question object. I think, yeah, it was already here. Okay, so I just remove the comment. Q1, new question, how are you today? The author is Enrico, etc. Okay? Run the code. Okay, it doesn't give error. That's already good news. Okay? We can print we can console log the Q1. Log Q1. Okay, save. Don't forget to save. Okay? So, console log question, answers empty. Okay? Just to show you that properties can be accessed by anybody in JavaScript objects. Okay, I'll do something like this. I define A1, right? So Q1 dot answers. Answers is an array. Push A1 and stop. Okay? It's a property of an object. It's public by definition. We said first lecture here, JavaScript, no private properties. Okay? Good and bad of the object-oriented programming in JavaScript. Okay, so let's print the question afterwards. Okay? So I'm just playing a little bit with the code. Save. But by the way, it should be recorded, right? Yes. So, okay, saved, run again. You see now we have the question, and the question has an array of answers with just one single element, which is the answer, okay, that we just added. Okay? Good. So, now, let's try to define what we call a method inside an object. Actually, a method is just a property which is a reference to a function. That's the idea of JavaScript. Okay? So, add. Okay? We would like to have a method to add an answer to the question. Okay? And it says, the specification also says what to pass. Pass a fully constructed answer object. So just one parameter. Okay? Not 4 parameters and then we construct the object. But this is just the specification. Okay? That's the choice we made. Okay, so add. Add, let's say, equal to function answer, this answer push. Good. And then we will refine it. Okay? But actually add, yeah, indeed. You see, add alone is nothing. I mean, we are defining a variable without a specifier. You know, it's forbidden. In JavaScript straight mode, it doesn't work. Okay? We should say something here. And actually, where do we want to put this add? Actually, this add is, again, a property of the object question. It's just a property that doesn't have a value like a string, a number, etc. It has a value which is a reference to a function. Where is the function defined? Exactly here. Okay? So this add, okay? This add creates a property, and this property cannot be simply printed like console log add, okay? Because it's a function. There's nothing to print. Okay? We can call it when it's needed. Okay? So we use it now. Instead of having Q1 and directly accessing answers, push, simply add. Right? How do you use a property that is actually a method, so it's a reference to a function? You use it with the brackets. If you use it with the brackets, JavaScript interprets the property as a reference to a function and calls the function. If it's not a function, of course, it gives an error. Okay? But, I mean, if the code is written correctly, it doesn't give any error. Let's try again. The result should be the same. Okay? Actually, you see, answer, question as the answer, and there is add, which indeed is not printed. I mean, what should console log print for add? It's nothing to print. Okay? It's one of the properties, so it wants to print, but actually at the text it's a function object and it doesn't print anything. Okay? Again, the console log is just for us, for practicing, for debugging. Okay? Okay, good. So what are we supposed to do now? I think we can add all the answers, right? First. Okay. So we have something more to show. Okay? So instead of adding one answer manually, you see that I've already prepared some code here. And this code basically creates create this answer object. I don't remember how I did. Answer text. Okay. A new answer. Yeah, I mean, I think Was it implemented in this way? No, indeed, it's wrong, right? Yeah. It was just to print the list of answer objects, okay? But we already have the push method, so the add method on the question, okay? So it suggests, it gives a good suggestion, right? Q1 add, okay? We don't want to add it to a generic array, because the array is in the other object, okay? So the other object already exists, because we already created it here, Q1. And so we can simply call Q1 add, okay? Q1 add. Good. Add what? A that comes from answer 1, 2, 3, I mean 0, 1, 2, 3, which is basically the first, second, third, fourth field of the array, okay? And we do it for all the 3 elements in the bigger array, so the list of answers. There are 3 answers, okay? So this part is not needed anymore, okay? It was just for practicing, just to create one answer, and we can just remove it. Otherwise, we have a double answer, right? Just run the code. Again, in the lab, try to run the code often. Every time you think it should work, try to run it, because you catch the errors quickly. Okay? Okay, A1 is not a function. It's not defined, sorry. A1, where is A1? Here, okay, I forgot to remove this line. Okay. So now you have the question empty, and then you have the question after it's been filled up with the answers, right? Add A 1, 2, 3 times. Okay? That's all. And so we implemented the add method. It was one of the requirements, right? Add an answer. Okay? Now we practice a bit more, something more complex. Okay? The find all. I think the find all. Yes. Find all name returns all the answers of a given respondent. Okay? So what is the respondent is the second field, the respondent name, that in our code is called respondent. Okay, luckily, no, we don't have a mismatch. Okay, so add has been implemented. Find all. Again, find all, good. This find all, another property that is a method, because we assign a function to this property. Now we need to decide what to write. Okay? Well, of course, it takes a respondent as a parameter. That's a specification. We don't have to invent anything. If you like to call it name, call it name. Okay? Call it name. Maybe we confuse the AI, right? No, I don't think. Okay, so how do we implement the filter? We saw the functional programming paradigm before, right? In the first 1 hour and a half. And so let's practice with that. The only other option is create an empty array, iterate over the array, over the answers, and check if the respondent is what we are searching for, add to the new array, return the new array. Right? You remember the slides, I think it was 3, right? Slide 3, Karl Bucks. That's the difference between the two approaches. You can write 4 lines of code or just 1. Okay? And I invite you to try to use the functional programming paradigm, not only because it's short, but because you find it a lot around in the examples, in the code that you are going to write for the web applications and so on. Okay? very often in the web application, you need to show only something, not all the list. Okay, this is JavaScript code. You need to write in your web application. And to do it in a readable way and in a faster way, try to use this paradigm, because it's quite easy, I would say, once you practice it a little bit. So, let's try to do it. Let's see what suggests. Return these answers, filter, filter takes a callback, okay? A callback that takes. If you don't know what it takes, the Visual Studio Code is so nice that it suggests, okay? I mean, it gives you the help, not the suggest. The AI suggests. Visual Studio Code only gives you the help, okay? So filter is a standard function of array, so the manual is there, okay? It reminds you that it takes a function that accepts up to 3 arguments, okay? And the filter method called the predicate of this function, one time for each element in the array. And of course, okay, if you want more details, you need to go into the MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network documentation. Otherwise, you see value index array, okay? Oops. Value index array. And you remember it, okay? And you remember, well, index and array, I don't need them. I just need the value, okay? So let's give a name to the value. Here it's A. A, it's the parameter of the function we need to pass. That is the synchronous callback that we saw this afternoon, I mean at the beginning of the lecture. And then we need a return value. For the filter, it's a Boolean value, true or false. Do we want to keep it or not? If yes, we should return true, otherwise false. Okay? And the condition is A respondent equal to name. Okay, name is the one that we pass to the function, and respondent is the name we gave here to the property of the object. Okay? If it's equal, triple equal is fine. I mean, there are 2 strings that should be perfectly equal, both strings. I mean, typically try to use the triple equal unless you're really sure that the conversion that is going to happen is wanted by you, okay? In general, with this triple equal, you catch more errors, okay? Or at least you remember that you need to convert the type of the value. Typically, the issue is between integers and, numbers, sorry, and strings, okay? Because in web application, when you read what the user types, they are strings. They are always strings, okay? And so you would like maybe to explicitly control the conversion between strings and numbers, okay? Good. That should be enough. Filter returns an array. So let's try to check it, if it works or not. So this should be, yes, console log. Q1, find all. Stop suggesting. Find all Antonio. Antonio is the name of my colleague on this course. There should be 2 instances, right? Not 3, but just 2. Let's save the file and run it. You see here the find all, okay? This is just a text for me to read the console log in an easier way, okay? To remember what I printed. And then you see there are just 2 answers. Answer hello world Antonio and find Antonio, okay? So we tried a functional programming method, this filter on the array, okay? Good. If you have any questions, feel free to stop me, okay? And then we have the dates. Okay. Dates are more complex because at this point, okay, after date returns an array of answer after the given date. Return an array of answers sorted by increasing date. Well, sorted maybe if the strings represent the date in a certain way, we can handle it without the library. But I mean, we are going to introduce the library now. List by score, okay. Score, just a sort, okay. Yeah, I mean, nothing really special at this point. We will do it, but at the end, okay? So let's try to introduce the date. We saw the dayjs library, and since it's needed for tomorrow's lab, I show you how to install the package and how to use it, okay? So now you see QA is empty. I mean, there is just one file, ex3, right? If you see here, just one file, ex3, okay? Now, what do? We do what we said, I think here, two commands, npm init, npm install dayjs, okay? Oops, sorry. npm init. It asks us a lot of questions. Just give enter, okay? I mean, it asks the package name, assuming that we want to create a package, but we don't really care, okay? Version, description, entry point. I mean, entry point is just if you want to run it in a certain way, but we don't really care. Test command, git repository, keywords, author, license. Is this okay? Yes. Okay? Just enter. Enter, 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 enter. Okay? You see a new file appeared in the folder, this package.json. Okay? Some information about our project. Let's call it project so we don't think too much about packages. Okay? In our project, I mean, there are some information that is listed here. At the moment, nothing really important, the name, the version, or all this stuff. I mean, just metadata that we don't care. Okay, now the important thing. Okay, so remember, npm install dayjs. To do this step, you need the network connection because you need to go to the repository. I mean, the computer goes to the repository and downloads the library, the package. npm install dayjs. Okay? I have the network connection, hopefully, yes. Okay, quite fast. Maybe it takes more time for you. Actually, I already tried during the break, so it already downloaded it into a cache locally somewhere, I don't care. Anyway, it installed this dayjs library somewhere in the system, okay? But let's check where the library has been installed. You see there is a new folder, node modules. Actually, it's full of stuff, okay? You see how many files are there, okay? But we don't open it, okay? It's just to show you. It's a new folder. Actually, you see it. Node modules, okay? There are plenty of files inside, but we will not touch those at any time because they are completely managed by this npm package manager that we are going to discuss in next lecture. Okay? So everything is handled automatically in that folder. Okay? The only thing we can do is delete the folder in case we want to reconstruct the dependencies. So re-import the libraries for some reasons. We want to change the version. We are not sure what we did. Whatever problem it might arise, we delete everything and we reconstruct from scratch. Okay, so in this case, we delete it. You see the package.json has been updated. Do you remember the slides? There is this new entry, dependencies. So the package.json, apart from name, version, all the metadata about our project, keeps track of the fact that we have a library installed in our project that can be imported and used by our project. So we will see next lecture how to download and reconstruct all the dependencies needed to run our project when we move to another computer. Okay? But for the moment, let's say, we know we need to have the dayjs library, in this case, from a certain version of the library. Okay? And then there is also this package lock that we are going to ignore it today, which has similar information but has hashes, a lot of other stuff that we're going to discuss next lecture. Okay? So let's just forget about the package lock. Let's just forget about the node modules. And let's use the dayjs. First of all, we need to import the dayjs. Dayjs is another file. Okay? Our file is this ex3. Dayjs is outside our file, so we need to import it somewhere. We go at the beginning. That's the safest place. Okay? They are hoisted in any case, but try to keep the code clean. Import. Give a name. Try to give the same name. That's a good habit. Okay? Just because if it's dayjs, if you call it in another way, you don't understand anything later on. Okay, dayjs from dayjs. Okay? Now it's grayed out a little bit because it's not yet used. At a certain point we use it. Okay? What's the best place to start? I think, when we create the answer. Okay, each answer should contain response, score, date. You see, at the moment, this date, that is the property inside the object, just contains what we pass as parameter to the constructor. And we pass a string, because we defined dates as strings. Okay? Let's try to use the dayjs, and so we convert the string into a dayjs object. Okay? What's the advantage? The advantage is dayjs object gives us a lot of methods to operate on the date. If we want to format it in a certain way, we want to apply some operation, we want to do differences between dates and so on. Okay? But it's our decision to to decide, sorry for the word trick, but it's to decide if we want to keep strings or date objects or whatever. Okay? Also in your web applications, okay, the user will type or will enter dates in the form of strings from the interface. Okay? And then it's up to you to decide which is the best point, if any, to convert it into a dayjs object or use a library to handle dates. Okay? It's a decision, it's a programming decision that is up to you, unless it is in the specification. Here, I think there's nothing in the specification, right? I just say pass a date, do it what you want. But since at a certain point, we need to implement this method after date, maybe it's better that when we enter new dates into an object, we convert it into a dayjs object, so that when we need to check if the date is before or after, we simply use the method provided by dayjs. Okay? So by the library. And we don't do the conversion of two strings and then the check. Okay? Because otherwise we need to convert the strings into dates every time we need to process the dates. Okay? This is a basic programming decision, but it's also common sense. I mean, I'm not doing something special to JavaScript. I would do the same in any language. Okay? Just reduce the number of times you need to do conversions between strings and dates and date objects. Okay? So let's try to do that. So you see strings, And you see dates here. Dayjs date, okay? Does it work? Not really sure. I would say it depends on how they implemented the dayjs method in the library, okay? Well, let's go to the documentation if you are not sure. So, installation, parse, string. Yeah, so you can use the method with a parameter, which is a string, provided that the string is this ISO 8601 format, okay? I mean, it's not a chance that I use a string format like this. Here month date, okay? I already knew that dayjs took this format, okay? If you write whatever you want, like 26 February and so on, I'm not sure it takes it, okay? The library is quite flexible, but I mean, you should check in the documentation if it works with if your case or not. Probably there is a more complex parse method. I cannot tell you string plus format. I cannot tell you exactly where it is. Maybe this is the case in which if you ask to the AI, you save time, okay? Because it already read all the documentation, and maybe it provides you an example which is very, very quickly helps you in understanding if what you are going to do it works or not. Okay? Okay, let's not lose too much time. Okay, so dayjs, okay? So, does it work? I hope. Let's, again, try to execute the code, okay? I executed the code. I didn't change anything except this dayjs, okay? So, yes, it works. Simply, the dayjs object is not so friendly with the console log, okay? But everything is there. That's the internal representation of dayjs. I don't care that much, okay? So, at this point, if I really want to have something which is, let's say, nice to see, I need to define my method to convert the object into a string, okay? So it's like the answer, where is the answer? Here. As I define any other method, I create a string method. It's a function. I don't want to use function, okay? Use the arrow function, why not? Okay? Okay. This text on this date format, it even understands dayjs. Okay? This is suggested by the AI, but basically what it did, it's a template literal. It took the 4 fields, and for the date, it just decided to format it in a certain way. Okay? It's a possibility of the dayjs library. You like another format, you check the documentation, and you see what happens. And actually, you should use this method, this str, okay? So, so when you print it, there's a place where you print it, console log, no, actually not, okay? So, how do you print it? Well, you remember we saw for each, okay? It's a bit unsafe here, because if it's undefined, the code is it doesn't work, okay? I mean, if there is no, I mean it depends. If it returns an empty array, it works, okay? I think so. No, it's fine. It's safe. Okay, we'll check it. So a console log a str, okay? Save. Okay? Hello world by Antonio on, okay? We converted the dayjs object into a string, and we attached it to other strings, and that's the representation for our answer. Let's check what happens. I mean, sometimes you just check. Okay. Yeah, it says undefined, but it doesn't crash. Okay? Because you can call the for each no, sorry, the find all, yes, undefined, yes. Find all for each returns undefined, okay? It's the return value of the undefined, okay? It's a return, yeah, it's safe. I mean, maybe it's not the best code, but it doesn't crash, okay? The point is that if this part is undefined, it crashes, okay? But it's not undefined because functional programming methods returns an empty array in case they have nothing to give you, okay? Anyway, okay, so I think we have time for one last thing, and the rest will be online on the Git after the lecture. I think, yeah, after date. We wanted to implement this method, right? But we need to define it. After date, okay? This after date, let's see the suggestion. Again, filter is after, okay? A date, and this works only because the date we have here is a dayjs object, because a string has no method is after, okay? But if you check in the documentation of the dayjs, there is this is after, is before, and so on methods, just because comparing string is so often done in programming that there is a method done exactly for this purpose, okay? Okay, so it's empty object because I think date after yesterday, no, 2015, it's last year, right? Let's have two. Okay, there are two, okay? And again, I use the library here, right? Dayjs without parameter gives the current time, date and time, okay? Subtract 1 day, it's very intuitive. So I don't have to change the code, write the string and so on, okay? So just practice with these things, okay? The rest of the methods is very, very similar. Once we implement one, all the rest follows in the same way, okay? List by score, list by date. You can sort on the date. You provide a function, takes the answers. You access the date, okay? And then either you compare them with some methods from dayjs, or you convert in a way that can be compared directly, like strings and so on, okay? It's up to you, okay? As long as it works in any case, it's fine, okay? Good. I would say since the time is almost over, we can stop here. I will finish the example in the office. Actually, I mean, just adapt what we wrote to, you know, and finish the methods. And I publish it on the Git together with the recording of the lectures today, later on. Okay? If you have any questions or comments, feel free to ask. Otherwise, there are two groups for the lab for tomorrow and a third group on Thursday. Feel free to come more or less whenever you want, as long as we fit in the room, okay? And the first time, we don't really know how many of you will come and how many of you will stay and so on, okay? So we have to adapt a little bit. Okay, no questions, so thank you and see you tomorrow for some of you and Thursday for the others, okay? Thank you.